Welcome to Season 5, Episode 7 of the Coaching Badges podcast, brought to you as always with the support of our good friends at PlayerStat Data. Thanks as always for listening in. Myself and Mark really appreciate you joining us. On the show tonight, the usual news and war chest items, along with the coach of head coaches, Cody Royle, amongst lots of other things. We really hope you enjoy the show. So, Mark, to kick us off, what have you got for us from the world of sports news this week?
I'm probably going to go back a couple of weeks to the end of the football season in Ireland, and Shelbourne winning the league. Probably limped over the line in the end, but I suppose it's hard to argue with that. The excitement and probably the last day was probably something that hasn't been experienced in Ireland for a long, long time. And the league table doesn't lie. They finished top and they obviously deserved it. And I think Damien Duff has been absolutely superb and goal dust for the league with his comments and his behaviour, and he's really brought a kind of an interest to it. Interest in the way everybody writing Shamrock Rovers off, but ran them so close in the end, and everybody else kind of dropping off. So, yeah, and then winning the cup, and then narrowly avoiding relegation, and Dundalk going down. So lots of changes, and it'll be an interesting season. The mad season and the merry-go-round begins with everybody and their granny linked with clubs, players, and God knows what. But all I can say is there's a certain club on the north side need to get their finger out, but we'll go into that another day. So that's that in Ireland. So congratulations to all, and congratulations to anybody that's actually managed to survive a whole season. It's a huge accomplishment considering how batshit crazy football in Ireland is. So that was good to see. And just when you think things don't get any weirder, Pep proves he's actually mortal after all, and it loses 5 games in the season. And there's nothing short of a national inquiry in the UK of what's going on. I have my own theory because it's no coincidence. Real Madrid and Man City, the two most dominant teams in Europe for the last number of years, are both teams struggling. Great squads and great players, but I have my own opinion that these teams tend to be the ones in the last and the latter stages of most competitions, domestically in Europe and internationally. And more, if you look at Rodri and everything what he said, players are being flogged to death at the expense of TV money. So I think, notwithstanding that there isn't internationals and all the others, but it's no coincidence that the two teams that have probably performed at the highest for the last 5-6 years are the ones in a huge kind of setback with big injuries as well. And Klopp, it's all about Arnie Slot. Sure, listen, who was Klopp? So yeah, interesting times again. But listen, I can't go without saying, what can I say? Brendan Rodgers, all is forgiven. All is forgiven. Could have the league wrapped up by January and won 4 more points, and we're into the uncharted area of next round of the Champions League. So listen, happy Christmas for me. I'm happy with that.
Once you're happy, mate, that's the main thing. Yeah, listen, some great points there. I have to mention Andrew Moran. We obviously have a close association with Andrew over the years. It's just wonderful to see him progressing. I hope he continues to progress. He seems to be getting guided, and good guidance along the way. But to see him make a competitive debut for his country was great. And even
very
now,
proud. Very proud.
It's a fantastic moment for him and his family, and to hear him speak and all. He's learning his craft, but he's always been a humble guy, and he speaks very well. And what's interesting is players and coaches alike around him speak well about him. So he's making good impressions on lots of people. So look, he's the kind of player that we need more of, I think, in this country. But yeah, it's just really, really good to see that.
And back in a green jersey as well.
Oh, listen, fantastic.
And you know what? I have one wish. I wish the Irish public and those in general would just let the lad play. Like the amount of pressure put him on for a young guy who came back off injury. He's only finding his groove. He's only learning his craft. Sorry. And yet the pressure and everything else that's put on, and the expectations, and even stuff like, everyone's looking for a move because he's not getting game time. He's 20 odd years of age.
Yeah.
He's getting game time every week. He's there to learn his craft. I just hope he's good people around him, and I know his father and all that is excellent, but I hope he's got lots of good people around him to manage that for him, because he's an exceptional young man and a great player with a big future, but it'll give him time.
Oh, listen, yeah, you're absolutely right. But look, Ireland, and I don't think it's unique to Ireland, but once there's any kind of sliver of success, in sport, the expectation seems to ramp up crazily overnight. So, I'll be very interested to see what the expectation is on Shells next year, as an example, for Duffer. So, yeah, look, you're right. But no, you also mentioned that, listen, congratulations to Drogheda. I thought they were incredible in the FAI Cup final. They certainly went into that as underdogs. And regardless of how Derry played on the day, you can only beat what's in front of you. And I thought Drogheda were exceptional in the cup final. Thought their tactics were spot on. And as you rightly said, they came through what ultimately was a very thrilling playoff series all along for a number of weeks. But yeah, Drogheda, staying in the Premier Division at the expense of Bray. But a brilliant end to the season. Those whole playoff games have become really, really good watch over the last few years. And it seems to get a lot of neutrals involved in watching the end of the season games as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, look, excellent, excellent.
and it's
And
interesting, even the new Champions League format, as a Celtic fan, which some people may not know, as a Celtic fan, that
you'd
new
never guess,
format,
Marky.
I know, that Champions League format actually suits teams like that because it being that league system and the incentive, I think it's actually a better format, personally myself.
Yeah,
Um,
and therein lies
it
a
gives
little
for
bit of a
more entertaining
challenge.
games, and the home and away doesn't really play into it. So I think it's actually much
No,
more
it's very good, but there's the kind of juxtaposition in that we argue on the one hand that there's way too many games, which there is, and I definitely think players now are playing every 3 days at the highest level. It's a huge physical and mental ask, and it's no coincidence. I think that clubs do go through slumps. Every 3 or 4 seasons, we saw it with Liverpool a few years ago. They fell off the cliff after winning the league, and
yeah.
now they're back to where they are with essentially the same players, but. So as fans, we're here sitting here talking about how great playoffs are and how Champions League are and all that. So we love the fact that there's all these exciting games. And then on the other side, we're saying, yeah, the players are getting flogged. So it is finding the balance.
Being honest with you, and I mean, I would probably say this being an Irish fan, but I think there's far too much international football. I've never known as many international breaks before Christmas as there
Yeah,
has been. And these competitions, Nations League, this league, playoffs, but it's just, and I think that's the bit because of the travel that's needed to get around for that,
yeah,
and because they're now inventing games in various different countries. So my own view is that too much international football domestically. I think there's a balance to be had as well, but the squads can be managed over that when they go away in international, and not due to the fact that it's absolutely horrible watching Ireland. That's got nothing to do with it.
Listen, things will get better. I really do think, as you said, silly season there, both sides of the water. Lots of managerial change already in England. New manager coming in at Man United. Lots of silly season talk in Ireland. Managers already losing their jobs, shortly after the end of the season. Lots of speculation about other clubs. So yeah, it's a crazy time of the year. And as you know, with the way the Irish League is structured in particular, with generally people only on 1 year contracts, there's always lots of movement at this time of the
And I
year.
just say, and I think that's a very interesting point. And Steve Salas, who we've had on our show, tweeted something very interesting off the back of the Leicester coach, Steve Cooper, being sacked after 12 games. And he
Yeah.
tweeted, and I just thought it was really interesting that he was approached at the very start to take that job. Everybody on the board said he was the ideal man. And then within 12 games, he's not. So football's
Listen,
broken. I think something has to happen.
yeah, and I do get the pressure of results, and there's huge money invested in clubs now, but for clubs to just serially keep changing their managers every number of months, it's not even years anymore. I think the average tenure in the Premier League is 18 months, for a manager, which is insane. Like I'm involved in business, trying to bed down a culture in 18 months is very,
Yeah.
very difficult. It takes 2 to 3 years. So but it's that's the world we're living in, sadly. But yeah, look, it's the same everywhere. But it'd be interesting to see what was pleasing, just going back to the League of Ireland in terms of players this year, was the amount of young players breaking through, both in the first division and probably more in the first division, and that it's a chance for them to kind of get experience at senior level before then they potentially move back to their parent club or bigger clubs come in for them. But that's interesting. And I know somebody tweeted some numbers today showing the percentage of younger players under 21s in the Premier Division and
Yeah, it was
varying
unbelievable.
degrees. Yeah, but interesting to see Drogheda probably the highest, and no surprise there. They have a very strong under 20s that won the under 20s league this year under Gavin Fleming. Really good side. And that those guys are getting a chance in the first team. So that's interesting. But yeah, certainly the first division is becoming a place where I think players are recognizing, it's a good learning curve to jump from
Yeah.
20s into senior football. So yeah, look, watch that space. I think the league is getting exciting. Certainly the standard has improved. Still would like to see it improve more in terms of the quality of the football, but it has got a hell of a lot better than if you even go back 5 years. So yeah, look, lots going on. And let's not forget the women's game as well. Some really exciting things happen there. And that league continues to grow and grow and grow at all levels from the senior level down. So, it's good. I
Yeah,
think
so
Irish
I mean, I
football
think
is
it's
healthy.
big game for Oil and Gleason coming out, and I think they've sold out again.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So it's
Great to see.
fantastic to see and well deserved. And they actually
Yeah.
play some really lovely football.
Yeah, no, it is good to see. So, yeah, look, there's something for everybody to either get involved in as player or in terms of a spectator. So, yeah, no, that's nice to see, and also good to see the league continuing to put on good events and promote the game within the country. Like I saw officially over 1 million fans attended League of Ireland games this year for the first time ever. Like that's phenomenal.
Really.
You know, people forget we are a small island and a small league, so those kind of numbers are massive for us. So, no, that's very, very impressive.
I just have to say one last thing because being a Dublin GAA fan, I think it would be very remiss of me to at least reference probably one of the best players of ever to play the game in James McCarthy, and then quickly followed by Brian Fenton announcing a retirement. For those who don't know the sport, totally amateur. If you talk about dedication, commitment, attitude, but sheer absolute brilliance. Go get out an hour and watch James McCarthy's Bet Spits, the guy of his Rolls Royce, and he's someone that I've had the pleasure of meeting. Someone I've had the pleasure of watching from Hill 16, not as much as most diehard fans, but a huge retiree and someone that played the game as it should be and just incredible. So yeah, wish to both of them, especially look in the future.
Yeah, listen, fantastic, mate. Really good shout out to those two guys. And again, yeah, for people who maybe aren't as familiar with the GA as we might be in Ireland, those guys are amateur in name only. The amount of time and effort they commit to their sport is incredible. They're essentially full time. And you go and watch them and look how fit GA players are now compared to 10 years ago. It's phenomenal. So yeah, yeah, really, really good stuff. So lots of good news as usual, mate. Loads to chew over. Hopefully we'll get a chance over a pint at Christmas time to get into those things a bit more, but we'll leave it there for now. Super. Player stat data, leveling the youth player performance data playing field. Retain your players for longer, monitor their development pathways, and help them develop into the players that they can become. Player stat data. Retain, monitor, develop. Moving on to our guest slot, and regular listeners will know that on every episode we'll try to bring some people on to offer different perspectives from the world of coaching, just in an effort for ourselves to share, learn and grow. Tonight we're delighted to be joined by Cody Royle to talk about his work coaching head coaches. Cody is the second set of eyes for 12 head coaches from 7 different team sports around the world currently. He believes that the greatest source of competitive advantage available in professional sports today is the optimization of your head coach. Cody has worked with some of the top head coaches in the world, from the FA, the Premier League, the AFL, and the NHL, just to name a few. He's also written 3 fantastic books which chronicle his own journey in coaching and leadership. Highly recommend you check out Second Set of Eyes, The Tough Stuff, and Where Others Won't. So, Cody, welcome to the pod. It's absolutely brilliant to have you join us tonight. I know it's morning for you in Toronto, but it's nighttime for us. But Cody, look, before we get into some questions, you might just give our listeners a brief overview of your own coaching journey to date.
Yeah, thanks for having me, lads. Yeah, the very quick version, Aussie Rules is my sport, or AFL. So I started coaching in the pathway system there, 15, 20 years ago. Did the typical Aussie thing and decided to travel when I was 25 with all intent and purpose of going home and getting back into coaching in the AFL system, and got to Toronto and never went home. So the kind of 2-year holiday visa became now 15 years here, and ended up coaching the men's national team here in Canada. So the Irish teams are actually here in Toronto at the moment competing in a 6-team international tournament. So that's my old team now. Coached Canada for about 10 years, and just after COVID 2021 decided to leave and do what I'm doing now, which is still coaching. I just coach other head coaches, which has been a completely new area to explore, but still very much coaching on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, incredibly lucky to have actually traveled with coaching, particularly in Aussie Rules, where, as you guys know, it's only played professionally in one country, and I'm not in that country.
Yeah.
And but to still get to do it and to get to see footy played internationally and to teach it to Canadians has been an absolute blessing. So no complaints from me whatsoever.
Well, fantastic. And we will dig in a little more, Cody, into how you now coach head coaches. But I'm interested in terms of the genesis of your coaching journey. Like, what attracted you to coaching in the first place?
I was an overthinker as a player, and whilst that's detrimental to you, particularly in a game like Aussie rules, where it's very much you need to be in the flow of the game and not thinking too much about it. Yeah, it was detrimental to my playing career, but it's an advantage, I think, in coaching. And so I was just lucky. I ran into an assistant coach at the time who became a mentor of mine, who tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You think about this at a level that this coaching thing might interest you." And, as a 23-year-old, I didn't know what coaching was. I had coaches, but you don't really know anything that's going on. And so he got me involved, and he gave me a book by Rick Charlesworth, who's Australia's field hockey coach, and said, "Read this." And I read that, and I was hooked immediately. And again, I think what he saw in me was what I just described to you, the overthinker, or someone who thinks deeply about where players are and how to develop players and how to develop teams. I think he noticed that in me and said, this is going to appeal to you. So I was lucky to just run into him randomly at a club that I was playing for. But as soon as I saw coaching, I was like, "Oh, this is me."
Who was that person?
Graham Bergen's his name,
Great.
and still good mates, a good mate of mine. I saw him a couple of months ago back home in Australia. But yeah, I think that seems to be a pretty common thing where athletes come through and someone taps them on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you should have a think about coaching."
Yeah, brilliant. It happened to me. A guy, I had just retired from football through injury and was a little bit pissed off, if I'm honest, that I couldn't play anymore, and took a kind of year out, kind of wandering around going, don't know what I want to do. And it was a former colleague of mine, a playing mate, who'd gone down the coaching road, kind of said, "Listen, I think you should have a check at this." And that was me hooked. So yeah, I think you're right. A lot of us have those people that kind of just make at least a suggestion at the start, and you go, "Yeah, I hadn't thought about that." So yeah, no, I'm glad that Graham reached out to you anyway.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's interesting. There's so much to take from what you've just saying. You obviously love coaching. What is it that you love about coaching? And what do you differentiate between coaching players and coaching coaches? And the reason I ask that, as someone who's never been able to play at the highest level, I absolutely loved coaching kids, but actually coaching some of the adults, I found that as a huge challenge because I felt that a lot of them came with these kind of preconceived ideas. Your book has been a huge of interest to me, how you talk, and we have very similar interests in. You take a lot of inspiration from NFL and some of the American coaches and how they do. So, if I could ask you, what do you see is the biggest difference between coaching kids and adults, and what is it you love about coaching?
I think what I love about it is what everyone describes about it, to be involved in development of human beings and to see them be able to do things that they didn't think they were able to do and have played a role in that. And, we probably give ourselves too much credit as coaches. We say we developed players, they develop themselves. We play a role in that. But, what's most captivating about it is when you work on something with a kid or an adult, I don't think it matters. And they do it in a game and they kind of run past you and they've got this smile on their face. Like, "I did the thing. I did the thing," or they come up to you after the game and, "Did you see me? We've been working on that. And I did it in competition in the pressure cooker." And I can't think of another example where that look is on their face. That look that I did the thing that we've been working on, or we did the thing that we've been working on. And so that's the most captivating for me. And to draw the bridge to now working with other coaches, it's exactly the same. You still get, now I have Zoom calls with coaches all around the world that are at the pinnacle of what they do. And we still have those same kind of conversations. They have that same look on their face that we strive towards something that either they've overlooked or they've pushed themselves to do something new, and they kind of come back with that "I did the thing" look on their face. And so that's what has me hooked about it. And yeah, I don't really see too much differentiation between kids and adults, but maybe that's where I've played in kind of the elite space, where what people are really interested in the competition is striving for really difficult things to do. And so I've played a role in that as opposed to participation sport. I haven't really been in the participation space. And so, yeah, that might be indicative of the types of people that are really aspiring for tough things to do. But that's the space that I like to play in as well.
Do you think language and communication is a big differentiator between adults and kids and how that's used in delivering a message?
I don't know if it should be like that. Like, obviously you can't, you have to coach who's in front of you. And so, their own development of language is going to play a part in that. But, my background from the corporate space is in user experience. And there's a thing in user experience, like, people think apps are intuitive, right? On their iPhone, they come in and they're doing their banking or their whatever, and they describe them as intuitive. They're not intuitive, they're just heavily designed. But one of the things in content development in user experience, particularly around apps where there's limited space, is you write almost for a child. And so your message has got to be clear. It's got to be concise. It's got to be, how do I progress at this point that I'm in, on this screen that I'm in? And so whilst my answer is yes, my answer is also kind of maybe. I think instructions for people can be quite simple and can be quite similar, whether it's children or adults. And all of that is to say, we can make it far too complex for whoever's in front of us by bringing in all this kind of coaching parlance or this academic study that I read or this fancy word, or we can make it more difficult for our athlete by over communicating. And I don't think we should necessarily.
Yeah, and the reason I was asking that is I recently watched a documentary, Dynasty, about the New England Patriots, and one of my all-time favorite coaches, Bill Belichick, who I know you speak about as well in some of your podcasts and some of your recordings. And his message was always stupidly simple, like, do your job. Know what your job is, but do your job, and getting that across. And I think, especially my own experience with some football coaches, not them all, and again, a lot of them are amateurs and doing this as volunteers, is they tend to overcomplicate the message, especially with adults, and use jargon and use words probably to reinforce that they know more than they probably do. Whereas the best coaches, I think, can simplify the message to make it very, very simple. And that's why I was kind of asking that. After watching that documentary at Dynasty, now I have a different view of Bill Belichick, but that's for another day's conversation.
Listen, I'm very interested in what you've said there, guys, but I wouldn't mind bringing you back, Cody. You mentioned the fact that you now deal with, head coaches at elite level. My understanding is you're certainly working with around, 10 to 15 of these head coaches around the world, different sports, different countries. So I'm really curious to ask you, do you think there's a cultural difference in the coaching in the different, countries and coaches that you're dealing with? And if so, what are those differences? Or do you see a kind of commonality regardless of what country you're in terms of these elite coaches?
I hate to answer this the same way that I've kind of already answered a couple of questions, both.
Yeah. No, and if that's the answer, that's great.
Certainly cultural differences. And so cultural differences, both in terms of the culture and the way that you understand groups, the way that you understand culture and what it is and how it's formulated. Coaching is a manifestation of like your beliefs of the world. And so obviously, if you take someone from Ireland, if you take someone from New Zealand, if you take someone from China, they're going to have different perceptions of the world, and that's what's coming to light in their coaching. And so, yes, there are certainly cultural differences there. Perhaps most pronounced, I would say, between somewhere like North America and Australia, or Australia, New Zealand, let's call it the South Pacific. I think in Australia, we do a very good job of kind of being more culture first. And there's all sorts of reasons for that with the player distribution model and the longevity of coaches and the longevity of players and all those kind of things. In the United States, where there's kind of free player movement and, again, so there's nuances to it, but there are cultural differences amongst the coaches. And so that's a challenge to develop them. It's really about trying to understand what they're trying to achieve with that group and why, as opposed to being judgmental and saying you should you should coach, you should read Legacy and just try to do it like the All Blacks do it. Like, what a bunch of crap as a suggestion that is, But then also, the similarities between the coaches, I would say, is probably less than people think. I think the one that I've seen is the coaches that I would work with are voracious learners. And that's an interesting one because that's one of the criticisms of head coaches is that they don't learn and they don't develop themselves and they're not interested in new ideas. I have not seen that at all. And potentially someone who's open to being coached as a head coach is open to learning anyway. And so that could be a bias of my group. But, the people that stand out to me are the ones that they will do anything to learn something new or find out some nugget that can help them be more competitive. If you're flying out in the morning after speaking at a conference, they'll be like, I'll meet you at the coffee shop at 5 a.m., like whatever it's going to take, because you've got something that can make me better. And they'll go and drive across town to meet you to hear the thing. And so, yeah, again, I think people kind of think head coaches are closed off, and they can be because they need to be. But the thing that I've really seen of the ones that are going to be really fantastic now and in the future is they are learning machines.
Wow, I love that.
I think that's fascinating. Do you know what? I think I've probably been one of those people guilty of meeting at 5 o'clock in the morning. I try to find any way possible to get in the mind of people that either inspire me or make me want to feel better. And I talk about boundaries quite a bit. Some of the coaches that you've worked with, you must have some role models or some people that really inspired you from early days. Could you give us examples of what it is or who those kind of people were, but what it is that you think makes a great coach that, anybody young or starting off or who's doing stuff on a voluntary basis, working with a community team, that if you want to kind of cut through the bullshit out there to go and find these good coaches, what are the traits or what kind of people have inspired you, that those kind of traits that you see across those kind of people?
Yeah. Like, I'm not a huge believer in trait theory, like all great leaders do X, Y, Z. I see no evidence for that. I think it's kind of selective, and you see people want to pick out the bits of all their favorite leaders, but that's turning a blind eye to a lot of other things. Like in Where Others Won't, I point out Winston Churchill had a lot of really poor traits. So did Steve Jobs. So did Nelson Mandela. So you can be really selective about the traits that you think great leaders have. But where I think, and this would be my advice, is where those three in particular, but I think all great leaders stand out, is they're so razor focused on this group in front of me. And so there's like a presence there. They're present with the team. What is it that this team needs on this day? What stimulus does this group need? Not what Jurgen Klopp's doing with Liverpool or something that I saw on Twitter that they're doing that I can copy. What does my group need today to get better? And I think you see that we were talking about Bill Belichick. There's this argument, could he do it with Tom Brady or not? And it's a bit of a stupid conversation. All that matters is he did it with Tom Brady. The player that was in front of him, that was the quarterback of the team, they did it. And so there doesn't need to be this conversation of what would have happened if, or, all these kind of hypotheses. The only thing that matters is the group or the player that is in front of you at that time. And that razor sharp focus on them and their needs at this time. And I think that holds true regardless of who you talk about in leadership in general, not just coaching.
I like that. That's interesting because I think you're right. We all do it. We it's like that, we look for the bias and just to confirm what we believe in, and we try and pick out things that suit what we believe in. Are there things in the coaches that you work with currently that you don't particularly like? Not that you'd call them out or anything, but things you recognize in coaches that you say, well, I think they're areas that they could work on themselves.
Yeah, of course. But that's why so the same advice rings true for me too, is my conversations need to be around what does this coach need at this time? And so I come into it non-judgmentally. It's not about coaching the Cody Royle way or some perfect way that I've concocted that I think leads to, X result. The reality is elite competition doesn't work like that. So I need to understand what the coach is trying to achieve, where they are in the team maturity development. So they'll be coaching a particular way based on what that team needs at that time. And so, but there are opportunities for me to call out things that either aren't working or ask questions of particular coaching techniques that maybe aren't resonating. It's like, did that get the type of response that you were looking for? And if the answer is no, then we can have a conversation about different ways to do it and different ways where it might actually work. And so, yeah, again, if I approach it in terms of just that's right or wrong, I don't think that's good coaching, frankly, because I don't think there's right or wrong in coaching outside of ethics and safety. You can try any technique that you want, but really it's about understanding what they were trying to get out of it and then did they achieve that? And if they didn't, that's your development opportunity from my perspective. Hey, I've seen this work. Do you want to try that? Or do you want to say it in this way? Or do you want to ask a question instead of making a statement? And that's where you can really get your hands dirty.
Yeah, I like that. Could I ask, typically, how long would you be working with somebody before, one, you start to recognize those things? Is it something you can pick up on instantly, or does that happen over a period of time where you're then comfortable in the relationship you've development to be able to have those kind of straight conversations?
Yeah, it takes time, like any coaching relationship. I would say in a rough estimate, let's call it 6 months. And that's part of conversations up front with coaches is like, look, we need to spend a good period of time getting to know each other so that, we trust each other to have those tough conversations. And so that's the time investment that goes into it is, you might not see any development for 6 months, but that's not unlike, getting back into the gyms. Like you're not going to have muscles and for, when you look at yourself in the mirror, it's like, we've got to put in some work. And then we start to see the results after that. And yeah, ultimately, I'm getting to a point of being 2, 3, 4 seasons down the track with some coaches, and now we're really into some heavy trust where we can both call each other out and have tough conversations when things are slipping off, or they're not accountable, or whatever the scenario is. But it takes time, like any level of trust.
I'm a big fan of your books. Is it 3 books that you have at the moment?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
3.
my
Jeez.
fourth question is like, knowing how hard it is to put a cookery book out together, I can only imagine. And I had loads of people contribute. And knowing how hard it is to put a book and everything else, and also the bravery to put yourself out there. First of all, what motivated you? Because they're probably like babies, bringing everything else. What motivated you to do a cookery, to do your books? I'm a big fan of the tough stuff one. And what kind of message, or what did you hope to achieve, or what did you want to give by doing the books? And what's your plans for? Do you have any more plans for any more books in the pipeline?
Yeah, well, I say to my wife every time I finish one, that's the last one for a while, and then a couple of weeks goes by and I've got a new idea, and that's happened again after the third one. But what I was hoping to achieve, like I think I am competitive. Like writing has been a passion that I've found later in life. It's became my profession. So I'm a writer by trade. And there is a competitive element to it that I think I was searching from my athletic career. Like after I finished playing, I really had this gap of competition and kind of mental stimulation. And so I am a little bit competitive with my writing, and I like to test my ideas against the best people in the world. It's kind of why I've really enjoyed publishing books and treating it as a bit of a competition against myself, and essentially like, do my ideas stack up in the broader world against Adam Grant and Michael Bungay Stanier and all these people that are writing, million copy sellers. And so I like that element of it. And I also just like to try to write about things that I think are overlooked or underappreciated. And so if you read all 3 of them, you kind of see a tone of consistency where it's like, you think this is important, but I actually believe this is more important. And that kind of is the red thread between them. And so, yeah, so that's my motivation behind them. And then once you see that they help other people, it also is addictive in a sense, in that people write to me reasonably often and say, I hope you don't stop writing because you're helping a lot of people. And that's not a realization that I had early. It's kind of come from getting DMs and emails from people that you realize the impact that you can have through books that I think other mediums maybe still don't really have. Podcasts to a certain degree, but I think a book still has a more weight and more gravitas to it in terms of sharing ideas. And so that's become a little bit of a motivation. How many messages from lovely people all around the world to just say, I hope you keep doing this because it does make a difference. And so, yeah, not something that I was hoping for or anticipating, and I don't need love and adulation. But when you hear messages like that, you're like, I really should keep trying to share ideas because they do help people. So
Oh,
that is to say,
100%.
yeah, I'm always working on some book idea. So yes, Mark, the answer is yes. And I'd also love to do a cookbook about avocados as well, by the way.
Don't
So
encourage him.
if you want to
Cody,
work on that with me,
no problem at all. I actually do think there is a project there in an actual cookbook for athletes to actually learn how to cook properly. Well, over
I
Zoom,
agree.
myself and Gav, the team that we were coaching because we couldn't get them on the field, I would set them weekly challenges of cooking over Zoom, where they all had a certain time to dial in, and they had to film themselves cooking something for breakfast, something for lunch, something for dinner, or if they were going and do some individual training, what they would do as a recovery meal. And
Yeah.
they got so competitive, but they got so much out of it. And then we also knew what they
Yeah.
were fueling their body with.
To be fair,
Brilliant.
it was a brilliant initiative, and it's one area I'm still involved in coaching. I'm now working with kind of older players, but the nutritional side of the game is still one area where I think young players in particular don't have the correct knowledge. They think they're eating the right stuff, but when you actually dig into it with them, a lot of the times they have some pretty bad habits. So I think it's an area that we as coaches could help, even if we don't understand it ourselves, to at least point them in the right direction, to speak to people who do know what they're talking about, even around timings. The amount of times I see players who rock up like trying to shove a food in an hour before a game, it's just crazy. So yeah, there's a huge thing there. And I think, Mark, you've mentioned that to me before. I think that'd be unbelievably helpful
Yeah.
to athletes of all kinds of different sports, just around what they should be eating, when they should be eating it, why they should be eating it. So yeah, there you go, boys. There's a side project for you. I told you, Cody, he'd mentioned cooking. So
You
he
did.
one more to go on his bingo card, and he hasn't
But also
mentioned it yet.
the money that would they would save instead of buying these stupid protein bars and energy drinks and stuff like that. Honest to God, I don't get it.
Well,
Yeah.
can I add on top of that?
Of
So
course.
I would say the same for coaches. So a lot of what I work through is what are you eating? Like we we do high performance knowledge work. So like it's our brains that we need fueled. And I still see at the professional level, like all of the coaches, not just the head coach, they eat at the craft table. They eat the protein bars and the snakes and the jellies and the Gatorade before the game. And so they're on a sugar high in the middle of a game when we're asking them to be rational, cool, calm decision makers.
That's a great point.
Um, and so that food is for athletic work. It's not the work that we do. And
Okay.
so there's a huge element there for coaches, exactly the same as what you mentioned there, Gav, like when and what to eat before a game and how long before and what should it look like and should it be maybe a quinoa salad instead of a huge burger or going through the McDonald's drive-through on the way to the game. Because if we're talking about small details in winning or losing games, those are small details that do add up.
I think it's brilliant points.
I think listen, I'll
There's the
let
next
you.
book, guys. Two
I'll give you
collaborations
a
now.
secret. The only reason I was kept in the coaching team is because I used to bring brownies and cookies for all the coaches for after training or energy bars, homemade. That's the only reason I was there.
Listen, Cody, you mentioned in a recent answer there about helping people and the impact that you're trying to make with people and people reaching out to you saying, look, I hope you keep writing books because they are helping me and they are making an impact. That's great to hear. So I'm curious, like we get it all the time. Young players, young coaches say, how do I become a coach? Or, somebody who's aspiring to potentially get into that role, like, the 23-year-old Cody who was approached by Graham to say, why don't you consider this? So if a young person came to you now and said, listen, Cody, I'm thinking about being a coach, what kind of advice could you give me? How would you set them off on the right foot?
I've thought a lot about this. I see a lot of similarities between coaching and stand-up comedy. So let me explain. There's actually a number of facets behind this, but I'll keep it on track with answering your question. The only way to learn how to be a stand-up comic is to get on stage and do the thing. And that's my advice for anyone that's getting into coaching is get on stage and do the thing. So
Brilliant.
everyone's worried about going and doing this badge and having this license and doing this. Go and do the thing. Because if I'm looking at your resume 15 years down the track, I don't want to see like the things that are just that everyone needs. I don't want to see that you've studied XYZ. I want to see that you've done. And so go to whatever level you can, go to a college and do it there. Go and coach underage, volunteer, but make sure that you're doing the thing, because coaching is something that you get drastically better at by doing it, just like stand-up comedy. And so that's my advice is worry slightly less about all of these certificates and worry slightly more about going and actually coaching at whatever level that you can find and do.
Brilliant advice. Absolutely brilliant advice. Because we talk to so many people about coaching, and you're right. Some people I think are almost afraid that, they can't validate where they're coaching by not having badges. I think it's crazy. Yes, they help, but you're right. You got to get out there and do it. But in doing that, you got to leave yourself open to the fact that you're going to make mistakes. I think back to some of the early sessions I ever delivered, and I'd look back at them now like they were car crashes. But I still just kept going and kept trying and kept asking people how to be better. There's one particular kid who sticks in my mind at the minute, Alex Bishop. We met him at the recent event, Mark, with Steve Salas. And Alex is a young kid, but I'm loving the fact that he's thrown himself into coaching. He's in his early 20s. He's out there doing the thing. And I admire that for him. And I keep saying to him, just reach out if you need help, but just keep doing what you're doing. So I think that's great, Cody. Superb advice, because I think we can get caught up in, somebody called it coaching snobbery once to me. And I was like, I don't think it's quite that, but I do think, we can't take ourselves too seriously. And if you really, really believe in it, just go and do it. Like really go and do it. So great advice. Not to say I'll be taking up stand-up comedy anytime soon. I think I'll leave that to you. And others.
A lot of the jokers. You still love coaching, or do you have any kind of regrets about any of the coaching that we all have, not regrets, but things that we could get better. That's natural. But do you have any kind of things where you really wish that you could have come back and said, I would have done it a different way? Or do you still love coaching? Do you still get that kind of real buzz if you when you're getting the opportunity to go and deliver a session, no matter who it's with?
I love it more than ever now. Like I bounce out of bed every morning to look at scores or, press conferences and being able to have coaches all over the world in competition and be helping them in real time's really given me a new lease of life. I don't have any regrets, but I do think about sliding doors. That's kind of where my mind does wander sometimes when I'm walking to pick my son up from daycare or whatever it may be. Like what if I had have gone home? Like I wonder what would have happened to me if I had have done my original plan and traveled for the year or two and then gone back and gotten into the coaching back home. But that's more just a wondering what would have happened as opposed to regretting doing it or not. But yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate. Like even I think I've opened doors by being here in Canada, like being a national team coach. So you'd be at all these conferences with the football team and the hockey team and the rugby team, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I had have been in Australia. So, that kind of started a lot of my writing books and podcast and development for myself was by virtue of technically being a national team coach. I got invited to all these conferences that had I just been an Aussie rules coach at suburban level or pathway system in Australia, I wouldn't have had access to. And so I'm very grateful that I chose the path, and so I don't have any regrets, but I do wonder sometimes, as I think we all do, if I had have gone left instead of right in my life, what would have happened?
Yeah, no, it's a great answer.
I'm conscious of time, but there's something you've said there, and we've had a lot of different guests from different, but probably you have something a little bit different and unique. What would you say the difference is between a national coach and a coach at a club level? Because probably I'm presuming your access to players is so much more limited time-wise. And I don't think we've had anybody on the pod over the years, Martin O'Neill, the exception as such, who has had that national or experience and then club experience. From a coach's point of view, like is time the biggest difference or access to players?
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing was in Aussie rules, that doesn't really exist outside of the international scene. Like I had to learn how to run training camps, for instance, because the only football that exists at home is club every week, training 3 nights a week. So I had to learn how to just organize a training camp, let alone what to put into it that is going to add up to some sort of cogent performance once we do actually play. And so, yeah, time, and similar to football, I would say that the biggest challenge is you are limited to players playing in certain positions for their clubs, that you need them to play different positions for you in the national team. So that was kind of always a bit of a challenge for us, particularly because Australians do play at the club level in Canadian football, but then in the national team, it's only the Canadians. And so, like, imagine having a national team in football where no one played in the midfield, right?
Mhm.
So those the key drivers of your team, the key drivers of your defense, of your offense, of your tempo, of your intensity, have never played there before. So they've got to learn on the international stage. That was kind of our big challenge. And so, yeah, with an added time restriction on top of that, that was the real difficulty. So it became, what are we going to teach that gives us the biggest bang for our buck? And we
That's
just load
fascinating.
up on that.
Yeah, I love that. Listen, Mark mentioned it there just before he asked that, and we're conscious of your time. You've been very, very generous. We understand it's early there. So, Cody, we'll wrap things up if we may, but nobody gets to leave the podcast without giving us their dream fantasy five-a-side team. So it's entirely up to you who makes the team. It can be players, coaches, friends. We've had all kinds of crazy answers over the 5 seasons. So who makes your dream team, Cody?
So am I on the five-a-side team?
Oh,
You're
you're in charge, mate. You can put me
Oh,
on if you want,
I get
but
to choose.
I've no knees and no hips anymore. So
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so I'll keep mine to coaching or coaches.
nice, nice.
So obviously, and I've seen him play on the beach, so I assume he's going to be very good in this context. Arsene Wenger was,
Oh,
I'm an Arsenal fan, so he's on there,
nice.
um, undoubtedly. I'll keep it to Bill Belichick, and he was in there. I've got a lot of questions for Bill, so I want kind of I want the water cooler, talk, or the sit down for oranges after the game kind of thing with
Nice.
Bill. I'm really interested in how you create a juggernaut. And so one of the biggest juggernauts I've seen is Dublin football. And so Jim Gavin's going on my team.
Oh, what a shout.
And I'll also include someone from home. I'll include Rick Charlesworth, actually, because he wrote the book that I mentioned that really got me involved. I've met Rick, but he's getting on a little bit now, so I don't know how good he'd be in my five-a-side team, but
Brilliant.
I'd learn a lot from him. So, yeah, 5 coaches, myself included.
Yourself included. And I back
Um,
yourself. I like that. So you've got
Absolutely.
Wenger, Belichick,
Oh, chick.
Jim Gavin, Rick
And Rick
Charlesworth,
Charlesworth.
and yourself. That's a hell of a team. There's people I'd like to sit down and have dinner with. Yeah,
That's
and
why. So, you can imagine the 5 of us in the car going through the McDonald's drive-through, just having a chat while we wait for our nuggets to come out. Like that's what I'm all like. Don't worry about the football side of things. We'd probably lose handily, but I'd learn a lot.
well, I
I
tell
tell
you,
you
mate.
one thing though, I would pity the manager or coach that has to deliver the talk free or half time for that lot.
I'd have no doubt I'd back Cody to deliver that really well. Well, look, mate, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. We really do appreciate, as we do all of our guests, giving up their time, giving up their knowledge to be so open and sharing. Like, you're doing unbelievable work. Mark has talked about you to me for years. So it's brilliant just to get to meet you. And I'll continue to do my own research and learn from what you're doing because I'm fascinated by it. Your books are on my reading list. So I hope we can keep in touch and have some more chats in years to come. But all it does is it remains for myself and Mark Cody's to thank you and wish you nothing but continued success. I think what you're doing is brilliant. And I love the fact that you're constantly looking to explore new ideas in terms of where you can help. And I also love the fact that you're trying to shine a light on areas that potentially don't get that kind of love and attention from other people. So yeah, listen, mate, pleasure to meet you. People can't see it on the pod, but he is wearing a Celtics cap. So just to keep Mark happy, we're all happy, I think, after that chat. So enjoy the rest of your day, mate, and hope to speak to you again somewhere along the way.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, my wife's from Sligo as well, so next time we do this, we can do it live when
Ah,
I'm back
nice. There
over.
you
So
go.
There you go.
Put it in the
And just
diary.
before you finish, home with Brother Walford. who set up Glasgow Celtic.
Oh, I knew he'd get it in. I knew it.
There it is. There it is. See?
Lads, you'd swear you practiced that. You'd think you rehearsed that. That was absolutely perfect. Well done. Cody, thanks, mate.
That was
Have a
excellent,
good
Cody.
day.
Thanks so much. That
Thanks,
was brilliant.
lads.
So, moving on to the war chest then every episode, as regular listeners will know, Mark will bring us some books or documentaries and stuff like that just to aid and supplement our own self-development. So, Mark, what have you got for us in the war chest this week?
I have a couple of things for you. The first thing I have is a documentary that Sky just came out with in the last week or so, called Chasing the Dream. There's been lots of different ones of these over the years, but this is actually quite interesting considering it's from Sky and the access that they have. So it's got interviews with Alex Ferguson, Trent Alexander, Kyle Walker, Pep, etc., etc. And they go on the just that whole academy structure and the likelihood of actually players making the grade. Like 1.65 million boys play the sport in the UK, with less than 1% of them making it into the academy, not anywhere else, but into the academy of a professional club.
Wow.
And as Trent Alexander said, you've got more chance of winning the lottery than making it as a professional footballer. So yeah, really, really interesting. Good documentary to watch. Good watch. Probably not going to be lots that you would see that you don't know already, but I think it's quite sobering, and probably it's probably something coming up over the holidays and Christmas over the next couple of weeks and months that might be no harm watching and showing to some players that seeing that this is the be all and end all of everything. So that's that. And then two other books. One is called The Racket on Tour with Tennis Golden Generation, and it's by Conor Nyland, the Irish tennis player, which captures the whole life of the tennis pro circuit, but from outside of the top 100. So very interesting, really, really good read. Lots to kind of take from it. And yeah, a different, not all airs and graces and not all flashy lights. And another one, and one of my favorite documentaries was Killing Escobar, but there's a really good book out called Narco Ball, Love, Death and Football in Escobar's Colombia by David Arrowsmith. And it's a really, really interesting book on the rise and fall of football and during Escobar's time.
Oh, well, I'll definitely check that one out. Yeah, famously, that player, Colombian player, killed after coming back from a World Cup. That was horrendous. But that country is riddled with so many crazy stories linked with gangs and football and all kinds of stuff. I'll definitely check that out. You just reminded me, as you were talking there about that Sky documentary, it prompted me to think, remember we had Ryan Baldy on the show a number of seasons back, and his book, and worth a shout out again, The Dream Factory. Remember that? Inside the Make or Break World of Academy Football. That was a brilliant, brilliant book. And again, sobering is the right word. You know, no harm for people to read the kind of stark realities of the numbers that do actually get in one or stay in academies, and who then goes on to the pro game. It's astounding, and yet people keep queuing up.
They've only released the first episode of this, so it looks like it's going to be quite a good grower. But what I did like it was they were even talking about the chances of getting into academy. So this wasn't even making it as a professional. This was academy. So it's
excellent. Definitely check that one out. The last one, just to mention, because we had mentioned it previously, Sprint, the documentary about the sprinters. The second season is just out. That includes the updated recent Olympics. So, you know, for anybody who's watched season one with Noah Lyles and Shaqiri Richardson and all these great characters, season two follows them through their Olympic journey in Paris. So I've only watched the first episode, but already it's full of drama. So worth a watch. That Sprint on
One
Netflix.
other thing that just came to my mind now, and it's my other favorite sport. NFL is now getting to the Christmas period when it gets all crazy, and we've had some incredible red zone on a Sunday is the way you should be watching NFL or any sport. But what else I would say, there's a program called Hard Knocks.
I love it.
An excellent watch. It was different teams, and they've just released that they will be following 4 different teams, and I can't remember which ones. They'll be following 4 different teams over the next couple of weeks and months.
Wow.
So yeah, you get as typical as Americans do, access all areas, everything goes, and very polished production, but a brilliant insight and a brilliant look into NFL, a sport that, some I know don't appreciate it, but it's brilliant.
Funny, I started watching Hard Knocks years ago, and I didn't really know much about NFL, but I just loved the inside the ropes bit. just seeing, with your coaching head on, how do they talk in the locker room? What kind of drills do they do? What's the contact time like? Blah, de blah. And you just pick up little bits. But that is a brilliant show. I've watched a good few of them now. But listen, I was just over in the States recently and I could not get over the 24/7, wall to wall, channel to channel coverage of university football, college football, pro football. Like they talk about it morning, noon, and night. Like every time I turned on the telly, I was like, oh my God, another show. And they can talk for hours and days, and the detail they get into is insane.
College
So you're
game
right.
day on a Saturday comes live from one of the big games. And so it usually beams back here in Ireland at about 3, maybe 3, 4, or 5 o'clock, depending on where the air is.
Yeah.
It is batshit crazy. It's a live show, panel discussion in the lead up to a game that may be 5, 6 hours later on.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, and I'm showing my age, when the FA Cup final used to be on.
Oh yeah, all day.
Start in the morning with cup final breakfast and go all the way through.
Yeah.
This is every week for college. And
Yeah.
then, like you say, it is Saturday is college game day, Sunday is NFL, Monday night football, Thursday night now Prime and Amazon. And it's just, and then wall to wall ESPN.
It's crazy. Oh, well, listen, I will continue to watch it and try and pick up little bits from it. But certainly some of the games I watched over the States were amazing, like really, really tight games. So yeah, look, really, really good. So yeah, fantastic stuff as always, mate. Really looking forward to checking out those few things. And sure, look, as I said, looking forward to catching up with you soon. Nice one. That's it, folks. The end of season 5, episode 7. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thanks and shout out, as always, to Colin and the amazing team at PlayerStat Data for being such a good, long-standing sponsorship partner of the show. Massive thanks to Cody Royle for joining us tonight for a chat. I loved his perspectives on head coaches themselves being performers and how he helps them to be the greatest source of competitive advantage for their teams. Fascinating stuff. Continued success, Cody. I hope we keep in touch. We'll be back in the new year with some more chat and discussion, but keep an ear out for one more live podcast bonus episode being released later in December. It'll close out the year nicely. As always, get in touch with us on Twitter at Coaching Badges. Stay safe and remember, when it comes to coaching, there's no right or wrong way, but there's always a better way. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.